We're going to be talking today a little bit about the peripheral nervous system, PNS for short. Remember, your peripheral nervous system is made up of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. So we will be looking specifically into the spine. So even though we're talking about the peripheral nervous system, remember that includes your spinal nerves. And in order for us to understand the spinal nerves, we have to also look at part of the central nervous system, which is the spinal cord. So during that portion, just don't get confused. Your peripheral nervous system, the only two structures you have are the cranial nerves and your spinal nerves. Okay, so your spinal nerves come out of the spine and the cranial nerves come out of the brain directly. We have two different means in which what it's going to control. So you have somatic nervous system. These are going to be your nerves that control skeletal systems and its conscious control. And then you have autonomic nervous systems, and these are unconscious activities. So these are going to control your heart, smooth muscles, and your glands. So you have 31 segments of vertebrae. So each of these vertebrae have a pair of nerves. So one coming out the right and one coming out of the left. You have the cervical enlargements, that's for your neck. You have thoracic, that would come out of your thoracic, lumbar, sacral nerves, and your coccygeal nerves here too. So every single spinal nerve, there's a pair of them. Each nerve emerges from the spinal root at points called roots. So when in a moment we'll be taking a look at the spinal cord, and the root is actually a part of the nerve itself. So you have dorsal root. Dorsal means the back. So when the signal comes in, it actually comes in through the back of the spine and comes out the front. So that would be your afferent sensory neuron. So your afferent sensory spinal nerve comes in through the back. So this right here would be your dorsal root ganglion right here. Then you have your ventral root ganglion. Ventral means the front. So again, your dorsal root would come in, and then it gets processed in the spinal nerve, or I'm sorry, in the spinal cord, and then it comes out of the ventral. So the ventral root ganglion, which is right here, this is your motor or efferent neuron. So this will go back to your effector organ and either contract it if it's a muscle, or stimulate it if it's a different type of muscle. So you need to know that the dorsal root ganglion is sensory and afferent, and knowing that it comes in the back. That should be easy for you because you all know what dorsal means. And the ventral root, which comes out the front, that's your motor and efferent. So you can kind of see a little better here your roots. So these all right here would be your roots. So this would be like the nerve coming in, and then it would come in through the dorsal, the back, right? So that's your dorsal root. That'd be your sensory. So that came from your sensory receptors. It gets processed in this gray matter. We'll talk about that in a minute, and then it will come out through. So now that the decision has been made on what should occur, it's going to come out through it's going to come out through the ventral, the front root, okay, and then go back to whatever your effector organ is. So now, even though I know this is supposed to be about mostly your nerves, we are going to look a little bit into the spinal cord. That means this is actually part of your central nervous system here. So this is where the processing will occur. So your dorsal horn, so these are called horns, and they kind of look like horns if you look at them, and they're made up of gray matter. They're a little gray when you look at it. So each vertebrae would have this. So when the dorsal root ganglion comes in, it's going to be processed, the afferent sensory information coming from the receptor. So it's going to come in right here. Okay, so this is part of the spinal cord. And then you have the ventral horn. It's the efferent signals to roots that lead to the effector. So the signal, you need to know, like, you need to be able to label these and know the way that the pathway is. So it comes in through the afferent. I'm sorry, it comes in the dorsal, but it is afferent. So the dorsal root, the dorsal horn, so dorsal root, dorsal horn, ventral horn, ventral root, and then goes back to the effector. Okay, so again, you have your dorsal root, dorsal horn, ventral horn, ventral root. You need to know that order. Okay, so when you're looking at your spinal, you have ascending and descending. Ascending are impulses traveling to the brain. So we would talk, so that'd be going to, and then descending would be impulses traveling back to the muscles or the motor efferent. How do you name these? They're named based on their location, just like how we did with this, how the vertebrae is named. The spinal nerves are the same way. So the first cervical vertebrae, the nerve coming in would be called C1 through C8, T1 through T12, L1 through L5, and you have your sacrum and coccyx. So knowing your numbers, so you have 8 pairs of cranial nerves, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar nerves, 5 sacral, and 1 coccyx. That gives you 31 total. And you can kind of see how they you have the pairs. So they come in through both sides of the spine. The reflex arcs, we already kind of went over that, but you have your spinal reflexes. Those are a lot faster. Reflex arcs pass through the spinal cord. So that's something that the spinal cord, so it would come in, so when you had that reflex, when you stimulated those sensory receptors, it would come in through the dorsal root, dorsal horn, through the ventral horn, ventral root, and back to the muscle and stimulate it. Your cranial nerves, there's 12 cranial nerves. I used to have my students memorize every one, but you don't have to know. The only ones that you really need to know are the sensory ones, and also the vagus is a big one because that controls pretty much all of your internal organs. So you have smell, vision, eye movement, touch and pain, facial expression, hearing, balance, and organs of the abdominal region. So you see your nerves when you flip the brain to see the bottom. You guys saw the olfactory bulbs and the optic nerves of the sheep brain. If they were all intact, there's a lot more to it than just that. Okay, so that's it for now. I know it was a short little thing there, but we'll do autonomic nervous system next. I wanted to split them up into 2 different videos. So, okay.